I walked into that courthouse wearing my only suit from college graduation 5 years ago, carrying 3 manila folders that would change everything. My parents, Sandra and Robert, sat with their expensive attorney, Harrison Blackwood, while my golden child brother Marcus whispered something that made them all chuckle. They rolled their eyes as I approached the defendant's table, and I heard my mother's familiar sigh of disappointment. The courtroom felt enormous, filled with tension so thick I could barely breathe. Everyone saw me as the family disappointment who had wasted his inheritance potential, the son who chose dirt and grass over corporate success. Judge Patricia Martinez entered through her chamber's door, black robes flowing, and I realized this single moment would determine whether I'd spend the rest of my life under my family's financial control or finally claim the independence my grandfather had intended for me. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. When I turned 18, my grandfather Eugene left me a trust fund worth $1.8 million. The catch was simple. My parents would serve as trustees until my 30th birthday, giving them complete control for 12 long years. At the time, it seemed reasonable. I was heading to community college for landscape design, and Grandpa Eugene always said, "Patience builds character." Everything started falling apart when I turned 25 and wanted to access some funds to start my landscaping business. I had saved $15,000 from working construction jobs, but I needed another $30,000 for equipment and a work truck. My business plan was solid, my grades were excellent, and I had 3 potential contracts lined up. "Absolutely not," my mother declared during that family dinner. "You've never been good with money, Chris. Remember when you bought that motorcycle? The motorcycle. A used Harley-Davidson I purchased for $3,000 after saving for 2 years. They acted like I had blown the money on drugs or gambling. In reality, that bike represented my freedom, my independence from constantly asking them for rides or borrowing their car." My father, Robert, nodded in agreement. "Your grandfather trusted us to protect you from poor financial decisions. Starting a landscaping business is too risky." Marcus, my older brother, the corporate attorney, adjusted his expensive tie and smiled condescendingly. "Maybe in a few years, little brother, when you've proven you can handle responsibility." That conversation haunted me for months. I started my landscaping business anyway using my savings and a small bank loan. Working dawn to dusk, I built a client base through sheer determination and quality work. But every time I needed equipment repairs or wanted to expand, I faced the same wall of family resistance. Then I discovered something that made my blood run cold. While helping my mother organize tax documents, I noticed several large withdrawals from an account I didn't recognize. The amounts were staggering: $50,000 here, $30,000 there. When I asked about it, she quickly shuffled the papers away. "That's none of your concern," she snapped. "We handle the financial matters in this family." But I had already seen enough. The account number matched my trust fund. I spent the next 6 months quietly investigating, requesting bank statements and transaction records. What I found destroyed any remaining faith I had in my family's integrity. They had been systematically stealing from my inheritance for 7 years, funding their luxury lifestyle while telling me I was financially irresponsible. The final straw came when I demanded a complete accounting of the trust. Instead of transparency, they filed a petition with the court to extend their control indefinitely, claiming I lacked the maturity to manage substantial assets. Now here I sat in this courtroom representing myself, because I couldn't afford an attorney after they had stolen $500,000 from my future. Judge Martinez called the hearing to order, her voice echoing through the high-ceilinged room. "This matter concerns the Peterson Family Trust and a petition to modify the terms of trustee responsibility." Harrison Blackwood stood smoothly, his tailored suit and confident demeanor commanding immediate attention. "Your Honor, my clients Robert and Sandra Peterson have faithfully managed their son's inheritance for 7 years. Unfortunately, Christopher has demonstrated poor judgment and lacks the financial literacy necessary to handle substantial assets." He gestured toward me with barely concealed disdain. "The evidence speaks for itself. Christopher lives in a modest apartment, works in manual labor, and made an impulsive purchase of an expensive motorcycle. His parents seek to protect him from his own poor decisions. The word stung because I knew how they sounded to an outside observer. My apartment was modest because I chose to live within my means. My landscaping work was honest labor that I took pride in. The motorcycle was a calculated purchase I had saved for diligently. Sandra took the witness stand, tears already forming in her eyes. She wore her best dress and jewelry, playing the concerned mother perfectly. Your Honor, I love my son deeply, but Christopher has always been impulsive with money. When he wanted to start his landscaping business, he had no realistic plan. We're simply trying to protect the inheritance his grandfather worked so hard to provide. Her performance was flawless, and I watched the judge's expression soften slightly. This was exactly what I had expected. But it still hurt to hear my own mother lie so convincingly about my character. Blackwood nodded approvingly. Mrs. Peterson and her husband have managed the trust conservatively, ensuring it maintains its value for Christopher's future. They ask only for the court's permission to continue this vital protection. The courtroom felt like it was closing in on me. Everything seemed stacked against the kid in the ill-fitting suit who dared to challenge his successful family. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. Instead of launching into a prepared speech, I walked to my table and picked up the first manila folder. My hands weren't shaking anymore. 7 months of investigation had led to this moment. "Mom," I said quietly, looking directly at Sandra, "can you explain why there's a $50,000 withdrawal from my trust account on the same day Marcus closed on his house?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sandra's face drained of every ounce of color, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Marcus frantically whispered something to Blackwood, who suddenly looked far less confident. My father, Robert, started to stand, then sat back down heavily. Judge Martinez leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued. "Could you repeat that question?" "Mr. Peterson." I held up the bank statement, my voice gaining strength with each word. "I'm asking my mother to explain how $50,000 from my inheritance coincidentally disappeared on the exact same day my brother made his down payment." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Sandra looked desperately at her attorney, but Blackwood was busy shuffling through his papers with growing alarm. Marcus had gone completely pale, just like the thumbnail promised. For 7 years I had been painted as the irresponsible one. But as I stood there holding evidence of their betrayal, I realized they were about to learn what real accountability looked like. The judge banged her gavel once. "I think we need to examine this evidence more carefully. Mr. Peterson, please approach the bench with those documents." Walking toward Judge Martinez with that bank statement felt like the longest journey of my life. Behind me, I could hear frantic whispers from my family's table, but I kept my focus straight ahead. This was my moment to prove that the disappointing son had been paying attention all along. Your Honor, I spent 6 months gathering financial records. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. What I discovered goes far beyond a single transaction. I opened my folder and spread out a timeline I had meticulously constructed. Each document told part of a larger story of systematic theft disguised as prudent financial management. This canceled check shows a $75,000 payment to Prestige Motors on the same day my parents purchased their new BMW. I continued. According to the trust documents, vehicle purchases for trustees are explicitly prohibited, unless directly related to trust business. Judge Martinez examined the evidence with growing concern. "And you obtained these records how?" "As a beneficiary, I have legal right to request trust documentation. It took multiple requests and several months, but the bank eventually provided complete transaction histories." Blackwood finally found his voice. "Your Honor, I object to this ambush tactic. These documents should have been provided during discovery." "Mr. Blackwood," the judge replied sharply, "your clients are the trustees. They should have provided complete accounting to the beneficiary years ago. Please continue, Mr. Peterson." I pulled out another set of documents, feeling momentum building in my favor. This withdrawal of $30,000 coincides with my mother's cosmetic surgery last year, and this series of payments totaling $75,000 went directly to my father's consulting business, which declared bankruptcy 6 months later. Sandra finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate squeak. "Chris, honey, we only used the money temporarily. We always intended to pay it back." "When?" I asked, turning to face her directly. "You've had 7 years to pay back temporary loans, but instead the withdrawals have increased every year." My father, Robert, could no longer contain himself. He shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." "Order," Judge Martinez commanded. "Mr. Peterson, you will remain seated or be held in contempt." Robert slumped back into his chair, but his outburst had revealed the true family dynamic. This wasn't about protecting me. It was about controlling access to money they felt entitled to use. Marcus finally spoke up, his lawyer training kicking in despite his obvious panic. "Your Honor, my brother is clearly upset about normal trustee expenses and management fees." I couldn't help but smile at his desperate attempt at damage control. Normal management fees. "Marcus, let me show you what normal looks like." From my folder, I produced a comparison chart I had prepared. According to industry standards, trustee fees should not exceed 2% annually. Based on that calculation, my parents should have collected approximately $36,000 over 7 years. Instead, they've withdrawn over $400,000. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. Even Blackwood looked shocked at the scope of the misappropriation. Furthermore, I continued, I hired a forensic accountant using money from my landscaping business. His analysis found additional unauthorized expenses, including family vacations charged to the trust, Marcus's wedding reception cost, and private school tuition for Marcus's children. Judge Martinez set down her pen and looked directly at my parents. "Mrs. Peterson. Mr. Peterson, these are very serious allegations. Do you have documentation justifying these expenditures as legitimate trust business?" Sandra looked at Robert, who looked at Marcus, who looked at Blackwood. The silence stretched until it became its own form of confession. "Your Honor." Blackwood finally said, "My clients request a brief recess to consult with counsel about these unexpected allegations." Unexpected. I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. The only unexpected thing is that it took this long for someone to demand an accounting. Then I reached for my second folder and the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted again. My family's panic was almost palpable. "Before we take any recess, Your Honor, I need to present evidence of something far more disturbing than financial mismanagement." Judge Martinez raised her eyebrows. "More disturbing than potential breach of fiduciary duty." I nodded grimly. 2 months ago, my parents attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent without my knowledge. The courtroom gasped. Sandra's hand flew to her chest and Marcus started shaking his head violently. "That's absolutely false," Robert protested. "Is it?" I pulled out a partially completed court filing and a canceled appointment confirmation. "This document shows an application to declare me mentally unfit to manage my inheritance. It was withdrawn only because I didn't show up for the psychological evaluation you scheduled without telling me." I held up the appointment reminder card. "You told me it was a routine checkup required by your insurance. The truth is you tried to trick me into a competency evaluation that would have given you permanent control of my trust." Judge Martinez's expression had turned thunderous. "Mr. Blackwood, did your clients consult with you about pursuing a competency determination?" Blackwood was frantically gathering his papers, clearly trying to distance himself from his client's actions. "Your Honor, I was not involved in any such proceedings. Because it was fraud," I stated clearly. "They forged my signature on the initial application and planned to claim I had requested the evaluation myself." The judge turned to my parents with barely contained anger. "Is this true?" Sandra finally broke, completely sobbing into her hands. "We were just trying to protect the family assets. Chris doesn't understand the complexities of wealth management." "The complexities of theft, you mean?" I replied. Robert started to object again, but Judge Martinez silenced him with a look that could have melted steel. "Mr. Peterson," she said to me, "do you have more evidence to present?" I looked at my third folder, still unopened, on the table. Inside was the nuclear option, the evidence that would completely destroy any remaining credibility my family might have. But seeing my mother's genuine distress gave me pause. Then I remembered 7 years of being called irresponsible. 7 years of having my judgment questioned while they systematically stole my future. 7 years of watching Marcus benefit from my inheritance while I worked construction jobs to pay for community college. I picked up the third folder. Yes, Your Honor. I believe you need to hear everything before making any decisions about my family's trustworthiness. Marcus had gone completely pale again, and this time I knew exactly why. Because he knew what was in that folder and he knew there was no explanation that could possibly justify what they had done. The courtroom fell silent as I opened the final folder, knowing that its contents would change our family forever. The third folder contained something that would shatter any remaining illusion about my family's motives. I had debated whether to use this evidence, knowing it would cross a line from which there might be no return. But seeing their continued defiance convinced me that half measures would only enable further abuse. Your Honor, I employed my landscaping company's entire savings to hire forensic accountant Benjamin Walsh. His audit revealed systematic misappropriation totaling over $400,000. I handed the judge a professionally bound report. The trust was originally valued at $1.8 million. After 7 years of their conservative management, it's worth $1.3 million. That's a loss of $500,000 during one of the strongest bull markets in American history. Judge Martinez flipped through the report, her expression growing more severe with each page. Mr. Walsh's analysis shows a clear pattern of personal expenditures disguised as trust business. The evidence goes beyond simple theft, I continued. Page 15 details family vacations to Hawaii, Las Vegas, and Europe, all charged to the trust as investment research trips. Page 23 shows Marcus's wedding reception, which cost $85,000 and was justified as a family networking event. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. Chris, you don't understand the full context of those expenses. Then explain the context of using my trust fund to pay private school tuition for your children, I shot back. $24,000 per year for 3 years justified as educational investments benefiting the family unit. The forensic accountant's report painted a picture of staggering entitlement. Every family expense had been rationalized as somehow benefiting the trust, while I lived in a modest apartment and drove a 15-year-old pickup truck. But the financial theft was only part of the story. Your Honor, I need to call a surprise witness. Objection, Blackwood said weakly. This witness wasn't disclosed during discovery. Because I only located him yesterday, I replied. William Sterling was my grandfather's accountant for 30 years. He has crucial information about the original trust intentions. Judge Martinez nodded. I'll allow it. Mr. Sterling, please take the witness stand. William Sterling was 78 years old, walked with a cane, and carried himself with the dignity of someone who had spent decades managing other people's money honestly. His testimony would prove devastating. Mr. Sterling, were you involved in creating the Peterson Family Trust? I was. Eugene Peterson consulted with me extensively about the terms and conditions. Did Mr. Eugene Peterson express any concerns about his son Robert's financial responsibility? Sterling nodded gravely. Eugene specifically told me that Robert had a history of poor financial decisions and a sense of entitlement to money he hadn't earned. That's why the trust included specific safeguards. What kind of safeguards? If the trustees misappropriated funds for personal use, they would forfeit any future inheritance rights and face immediate removal from all fiduciary positions. The courtroom erupted. My parents had never read the complete trust document, focusing only on the clauses that gave them control. They had no idea their theft would cost them their own inheritance from my grandfather's estate. But I wasn't finished. Mr. Sterling, did my grandfather express preferences about my career choices or lifestyle? Eugene was extremely proud of your independence and work ethic. He specifically mentioned wanting the trust to supplement your earned income, not replace your need to work. He believed manual labor built character. Every argument my family had made about my choices contradicted my grandfather's actual wishes. The landscaping business they criticized was exactly what he had hoped I would pursue. Sterling continued. Eugene also left sealed instructions to be opened if the trustees ever petitioned for extended control. Objection. Blackwood stood desperately. This alleged sealed instruction hasn't been authenticated. I have the original in my office safe, Sterling replied calmly. Eugene gave me explicit instructions to present it if this situation arose. Judge Martinez leaned forward. What do these instructions say? They contain Eugene's detailed assessment of his family members and specific directions for immediate transfer of all assets to Christopher if the trustees violated their fiduciary duties. The implications hit my family like physical blows. Not only would they lose control of my trust, but they would forfeit their own inheritance rights completely. Robert stood again, his face purple with rage. This is ridiculous. We've dedicated years to managing that money responsibly. By stealing $500,000? I asked incredulously. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. The device was no bigger than a credit card, but it contained audio that would end any remaining debate about my family's intentions. Your Honor, I recorded this conversation at a family barbecue 3 weeks ago. I pressed play, and my father's voice filled the courtroom. We need to delay Chris's access until after Marcus's campaign. That trust money could fund his run for district attorney. My mother's voice followed. What if Chris demands an accounting before then? Marcus's voice was clear and unmistakable. We'll file for extended guardianship. Claim he's financially incompetent. By the time that gets resolved, we'll have figured out how to replace the money we've borrowed. Borrowed. My father laughed on the recording. Robert, we're never paying that back. Chris will never be responsible enough to handle that much money. The silence that followed the recording was absolute. Even the court stenographer had stopped typing, staring at my family in shock. Judge Martinez's voice was ice cold when she finally spoke. Mr. Blackwood, do your clients wish to respond to this evidence? Blackwood looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Your Honor, my clients invoke their Fifth Amendment rights and request immediate termination of these proceedings. Denied. This is a civil matter, and they are trustees with fiduciary responsibilities. I stood to address the court one final time. Your Honor, I've presented clear evidence of systematic theft, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to permanently deprive me of my rightful inheritance. But this case isn't really about money. I turned to look at my family directly. This is about respect. For 7 years, you treated me like a child incapable of making decisions about my own life. You used my trust fund like a personal bank account while lecturing me about financial responsibility. You tried to have me declared mentally incompetent rather than admit your own theft. Sandra was sobbing uncontrollably now, and even Marcus looked genuinely ashamed for the first time. I don't want to destroy our family, I continued. But I won't allow this abuse to continue. The trust belongs to me, and I'm prepared to use every legal remedy available to protect it. Judge Martinez nodded slowly. Mr. Peterson, what specific relief are you seeking from this court? Immediate removal of the current trustees, a complete forensic audit of all trust activities, and restitution for all misappropriated funds with interest calculated at market rates. And if restitution isn't possible, I took a deep breath before delivering the final blow. Then I'm requesting this court refer the matter to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. The threat of criminal charges changed everything. My parents could face years in prison for their systematic theft. Marcus could lose his law license and his legal career. But as I looked at my mother's terrified face, I realized the nuclear option came with its own terrible cost. Destroying them completely wouldn't give me back the 7 years of disrespect and manipulation. I needed to find a path that delivered justice without destroying the possibility of ever having a real family again. However, I added, I'm prepared to discuss alternative resolutions that ensure full accountability while avoiding criminal prosecution. Judge Martinez raised her eyebrows. What kind of alternative resolutions? That's when I realized this case was about to become something unprecedented in family court, because the terms I was about to propose would shock everyone in that courtroom, including my own family. Your Honor, before I propose any settlement terms, I want to make something clear. I said, my voice carrying a weight I had never felt before. This was never about the money. This was about respect, honesty, and the right to control my own life. Judge Martinez leaned back in her chair. I'm listening, Mr. Peterson. I propose the following terms: immediate transfer of all trustee rights to me, complete restitution of all misappropriated funds within 6 months, and a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing from each family member. The silence stretched as everyone processed what I had said. These weren't the desperate demands of a victim. They were the calculated terms of someone who held all the leverage. But if my family chooses to accept these terms and make full restitution, I won't pursue criminal charges. Blackwood looked stunned. Your Honor, my clients need time to consider these terms and their financial implications. How much time? Judge Martinez asked. 30 days to evaluate their assets and determine if restitution is feasible. I shook my head. No, they've had 7 years to consider the consequences of their actions. I want an answer today. Judge Martinez intervened. Mr. Peterson, given the complexity of the financial issues involved, I think a brief recess is appropriate. We'll reconvene in 2 hours. As the judge left the courtroom, my family huddled with their attorney, while I sat alone at my table. The weight of what I had just done began to sink in. I had essentially given my family a choice between financial ruin and criminal prosecution. During the recess, something unexpected happened. Marcus approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. Chris, can we talk privately? I followed him to an empty conference room, unsure what to expect. I need you to know something. He began, his usual confidence completely gone. I've been jealous of you for years. The admission caught me completely off guard. Jealous of me, Marcus? You're the successful lawyer. You have the perfect family, the big house, the respect of everyone in town. He laughed bitterly. Built on stolen money from my little brother's trust fund. Do you know what that feels like? I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, but saw only genuine shame. When Grandpa Eugene left you that trust, I was furious. I was the older son, the one who went to law school, who followed the traditional path to success. But he chose you. Marcus sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. I convinced myself you didn't deserve it, that you'd waste the money on motorcycles and failed business ventures. It made it easier to justify using the funds for my education, my house, my children's schools. So you just went along with Mom and Dad's plan to steal from me. Worse than that, the plan was my idea. The confession hit me like a physical blow. My own brother had orchestrated the systematic theft of my inheritance. I researched the legal loopholes, identified the trust's vulnerabilities, and showed them how to access the funds without immediate detection. I told myself it was temporary, that we'd pay it back before you turned 30. But you never intended to pay it back. Marcus nodded miserably. The more we took, the harder it became to imagine replacing it. And the more successful your landscaping business became, the more threatened I felt. You were proving you didn't need the trust money to succeed. Then why continue the theft? Because admitting what we'd done would have meant admitting I wasn't the successful son anymore. I was just a thief who had stolen from his little brother. I sat across from Marcus, trying to process this revelation. The golden child who had been held up as an example my entire life was confessing to masterminding the betrayal of his own family. What do you want from me, Marcus? I want to make this right, but first I need to tell you something else. He pulled out his phone and showed me a bank statement. I've been secretly saving money for the past year, preparing for the day you figured out what we'd done. I have $67,000 set aside for restitution. $67,000 doesn't cover $400,000 in theft. I know, but it's a start. And Chris, I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness, including testifying against Mom and Dad. Marcus nodded without hesitation. If that's what justice requires? Yes. When we returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed completely. My parents looked defeated, while Blackwood appeared to have aged 10 years during the recess. Judge Martinez called the session to order. Have the parties reached any resolution during recess? Blackwood stood slowly. Your Honor, my clients are prepared to accept Mr. Christopher Peterson's terms with one modification. What modification? They request 12 months instead of 6 to complete restitution, given the need to liquidate substantial assets. I looked at my family's defeated faces and felt something unexpected pity. These people who had controlled my life for 7 years now looked small and frightened. Your Honor, I'll accept 12 months on one additional condition, which is Marcus Peterson must resign his partnership at Blackwood Sterling and Associates and publicly acknowledge his role in orchestrating the misappropriation. The condition was devastating. Marcus's legal career would be effectively over, his reputation destroyed, his financial future uncertain. But he stood immediately. "I accept those terms." Judge Martinez looked surprised. "Mr. Marcus Peterson, do you understand the professional consequences of this admission?" "Yes, Your Honor. I also understand that accepting consequences is the first step toward redemption." Something had fundamentally shifted in the family dynamic during that 2-hour recess. The brother who had betrayed me was now willing to sacrifice his career for the chance at genuine reconciliation. Sandra finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, we accept all of Christopher's terms." "And the restitution timeline?" Robert answered this time. "We'll sell our house, our cars, and liquidate all investments to meet the 12-month deadline." Judge Martinez made notes in her file. "I'm scheduling a status conference in 6 months to monitor compliance. If restitution isn't completed as agreed, this matter will be referred to the district attorney for criminal prosecution." As we prepared to leave the courtroom, something unexpected happened. The judge called my name. "Mr. Peterson, I want to commend your handling of this matter. Your combination of thorough preparation and willingness to show mercy represents the best of our legal system." "Thank you, Your Honor. I'm also recommending you for the Community Justice Award from the State Bar Association. Your case demonstrates that sometimes the most powerful legal arguments are also the most compassionate ones." Walking out of that courthouse, I realized that fighting for justice had given me something more valuable than money: genuine self-respect and the foundation for authentic family relationships built on honesty rather than control. But the real test would come in the months ahead as we all learned whether redemption was truly possible or just another word for delayed consequences. 6 months later, I stood in the driveway of my parents' house, watching them pack boxes into a moving truck. The sprawling suburban home where I had grown up was being sold to fund their restitution payments. Seeing my childhood memories reduced to cardboard boxes should have felt triumphant, but instead it felt hollow. "Chris, could you help me with this?" my mother called from the front porch. Sandra was struggling with a box of photo albums, the same pictures that had documented our family's supposedly happy moments. I took the box from her hands, noting how much weight she had lost during the stress of the past months. "I kept some pictures separate for you," she said quietly, "from when you were little before everything got so complicated." "Mom, you don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. I need you to remember that there was a time when we were a real family before greed made us forget what actually mattered." The moving process had been emotionally brutal for all of us. My parents had downsized to a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. Their luxury cars were gone, replaced by a single used Honda Civic. Most painfully, they had been forced to drain their retirement accounts, leaving them financially vulnerable for the first time in decades. Marcus's situation was even more dramatic. His resignation from the law firm had made front-page news in our local paper. "Prominent attorney admits to trust fund fraud." His legal career was effectively over, his professional reputation. Destroyed, his financial future uncertain. "How are you holding up?" I asked him as we loaded furniture. "Some days are better than others," he admitted. Losing my partnership hurt, but losing my integrity hurt worse. At least now I can look at myself in the mirror. Marcus had been working at a nonprofit legal clinic for the past 3 months, earning 1/10 of his former salary. His wife, Jennifer, had been remarkably supportive, though their lifestyle had changed dramatically. They had sold their McMansion and moved into a modest ranch house, and their children now attended public school instead of private academy. "The kids are actually happier," Marcus told me. "They're making real friends instead of networking with other rich kids." Jennifer says it's the first time our family has felt genuine. The financial restitution was proceeding ahead of schedule. The house sale would provide $240,000 toward my trust repayment. Combined with liquidated investments and retirement accounts, they were on track to restore the full $400,000 within 10 months instead of 12. But money was only part of the healing process. "Chris, I need to ask you something," my father said as we carried his desk to the truck. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive us? Robert looked older than his 58 years. The stress had turned his hair completely gray, and he moved with the careful precision of someone whose confidence had been shattered. I don't know, Dad. Forgiveness isn't something I can force. I understand. But I want you to know that losing your respect has been worse than losing the house. We worked in relative silence for the rest of the morning, each of us processing our own complicated emotions. This wasn't the dramatic confrontation I had imagined during 7 years of resentment. Instead, it felt like watching the slow dismantling of everything our family had pretended to be. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Dorothy Williams, my grandfather's old friend, knocked on the door just as we finished loading the truck. I wanted to see how everyone was handling this transition, she said, looking around at the empty house. Dorothy was 84 years old, sharp as ever, and one of the few people who had known my grandfather well enough to understand his true intentions for the trust. Eugene would be proud of how you handled this situation, Chris. Would he? I sometimes wonder if I was too harsh. Dorothy shook her head firmly. Eugene specifically told me he worried about Robert's sense of entitlement. He designed that trust to teach lessons about accountability and earning respect. You honored his intentions perfectly. She turned to address my parents directly. Eugene also told me he hoped Robert would eventually learn to value character over money. This crisis might be exactly what he needed to find his way back to the man Eugene always believed he could become. Robert broke down completely at her words, sobbing with the grief of a man who had finally understood what he had lost through his own choices. I failed him, he whispered. I failed my father. I failed my son. I failed everyone who ever believed in me. Failure isn't permanent unless you choose to make it so, Dorothy replied gently. Eugene always said redemption was possible for anyone willing to do the hard work of change. Over the following months, I watched my family begin that hard work. My parents attended financial counseling and therapy, learning to live within their means for the first time in decades. Marcus threw himself into his nonprofit work, finding satisfaction in helping people who couldn't afford legal representation. Most surprisingly, our family dinners resumed after a 3-month hiatus. The first few were awkward and tentative, but gradually we began having honest conversations about our past and our hopes for the future. I've been thinking about something, Marcus said during one of these dinners. I want to establish a scholarship fund for community college students pursuing trade certifications. With what money? I asked. Whatever I can save from my nonprofit salary. It won't be much at first, but it's a start. I want to do something positive with the guilt I've been carrying. Sandra set down her fork and looked at both of us. I have a confession to make. I've been volunteering at the food bank for the past 2 months. Why? Because for the first time in my adult life, I understand what it feels like to worry about money. I wanted to help other families facing financial stress. The transformation wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was real. My parents were learning to find meaning in contribution rather than consumption. Marcus was discovering that helping others provided more satisfaction than winning cases for wealthy clients. My own life had changed dramatically as well. The landscaping business was thriving with 12 full-time employees and contracts throughout the county. The trust fund, once restored, would allow me to expand further and establish the scholarship program I had always dreamed of creating. More importantly, I had gained something I hadn't expected: genuine respect from my family members earned through standing up for my principles rather than inherited through genetic accident. But the most significant change was still to come, and it would happen at a moment when I least expected it. 9 months after the courtroom confrontation, I received a phone call that would test everything we had built toward redemption. Chris, it's Marcus. Dad's in the hospital. My father had suffered a heart attack while working his new job as a customer service representative. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. The man who had spent years avoiding honest work was hospitalized from the stress of learning to earn an honest living. I arrived at the hospital to find my family gathered in the cardiac care waiting room. Sandra looked exhausted, and Marcus was pacing nervously by the windows. How is he? I asked. Stable, but they want to keep him for observation, Sandra replied. The doctor said stress was a major contributing factor. We sat together in uncomfortable silence, each of us wrestling with our own complicated feelings. 6 months earlier, I might have felt that Robert's condition was karmic justice. Now I just felt worried about my father. I need to tell you all something, Sandra said suddenly. The medical bills are going to be substantial. Our insurance changed when Robert lost his management position. The financial implications were immediately clear. My parents had been using every available dollar for trust restitution. A major medical emergency could derail their ability to complete the payments on schedule. How much are we talking about? Marcus asked. Potentially $20,000 to $30,000 depending on how long he needs to stay and what procedures they recommend. I found myself at a crossroads that would define the rest of our family relationships. Under the court agreement, any missed restitution payments would trigger criminal prosecution. My parents could face jail time if they couldn't meet their obligations due to medical expenses. I'll cover Dad's medical bills, I said without hesitation. Sandra stared at me in shock. Chris? You can't do that. Not after everything we've put you through. Actually, I can, and I'm going to. Marcus looked confused. But that money would come out of your trust, essentially reducing the restitution we owe you. The restitution isn't about the money anymore. It's about accountability and change. You've all demonstrated genuine commitment to making things right. Over the next week, as Robert recovered in the hospital, our family had the most honest conversations of our lives. Without the pretense of wealth or status to hide behind, we talked about our fears, our mistakes, and our hopes for the future. I spent so many years resenting your grandfather's success, Robert admitted from his hospital bed. I felt like nothing I accomplished would ever be good enough compared to what he built. So you decided to steal from his grandson instead of building something yourself. Robert winced at the directness of my question. I convinced myself I deserved compensation for managing the trust. But the truth is, I was angry that he trusted you more than he trusted me. He didn't trust me with the money either, Dad. That's why he set up the trust structure. But he trusted your character. That's something I lost sight of completely. Sandra reached for my hand across the hospital room. Chris, I need you to know that watching you build your business while we were stealing from you was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. Every success you achieved made our betrayal worse. Then why didn't you stop? Pride. We had already taken so much that admitting it would have meant admitting we were thieves. It seemed easier to double down and hope we could replace the money before you found out. Marcus added, the psychological trap was thinking we could control the situation indefinitely. We told ourselves stories about protecting you from poor decisions while making terrible decisions ourselves. These conversations continued over several days, and something remarkable happened. For the first time in years, we began functioning as an actual family, rather than people connected only by genetics and shared financial interests. When Robert was discharged from the hospital, I made another decision that surprised everyone. I want to propose a modification to our restitution agreement, I announced during our next family dinner. What kind of modification? Marcus asked warily. Instead of requiring full monetary repayment, I want to establish a family foundation focused on financial literacy education for young adults. The proposal was radical. Rather than demanding every dollar back, I wanted to transform our painful experience into something that could help other families avoid similar betrayals. You would contribute whatever you can financially, but more importantly, you would contribute your time and experience to help young people understand financial responsibility and family dynamics. Sandra looked stunned. You want us to help teach financial responsibility? Who better than people who learn these lessons the hard way? Your mistakes could become other people's wisdom. The foundation would serve multiple purposes. It would provide meaningful work for my parents in their later years, give Marcus a chance to use his legal skills for positive impact, and create lasting value from our family's painful experience. I'll match your contributions dollar for dollar from the trust fund, I continued. But the real value will come from your personal involvement in helping young adults navigate family financial conflicts. Robert began crying again, but this time the tears seemed different. You're giving us a chance to turn our worst mistakes into something meaningful. I'm giving us all a chance to build something better than what we had before. Judge Martinez was initially skeptical when we presented the modified agreement to the court. Mr. Peterson, are you certain you want to reduce the monetary restitution in favor of this foundation structure? Yes, Your Honor. I believe this approach better serves the interests of justice and family healing. She reviewed our proposal, carefully consulted with both attorneys, and then made her decision. This court approves the modified agreement with one condition: the foundation must be established as a legally binding entity with independent oversight to ensure proper management of funds. Walking out of the courthouse for the second time, I realized that justice didn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looked like transformation, redemption, and the courage to build something better from the wreckage of betrayal. The Peterson Family Financial Literacy Foundation was officially established 3 months later, funded by $200,000 from the trust and matching contributions from my family members. Our first workshop was scheduled for the following month, and surprisingly, Marcus was excited about teaching young people how to recognize and avoid the financial manipulation tactics he had once employed. I never thought I'd find meaningful work again after losing my law license, he told me. But helping kids understand these issues feels more important than anything I did as a corporate attorney. The foundation represented something unprecedented, a family that had turned their deepest betrayal into their greatest contribution to society. But there was still one final lesson waiting for us, and it would come from the most unexpected source. 1 year after our courthouse confrontation, I found myself standing in the same building where this journey had begun. But this time, I wasn't there as a defendant fighting for my financial independence. I was there to receive the Community Justice Award from the State Bar Association. Judge Martinez was presenting the award, and my entire family sat in the front row of the courthouse gallery. The contrast with our first appearance couldn't have been more striking. Instead of expensive suits and hostile glares, my family wore modest clothing and genuine smiles of pride. The Peterson case represents something rare in our legal system, Judge Martinez told the assembled crowd. It demonstrates that justice isn't always about punishment, but sometimes about transformation and the courage to forge new paths forward. As I accepted the award, I looked out at my family and realized how much we had all changed. Sandra had lost 30 pounds and looked healthier than she had in years. Robert was working full-time at a nonprofit organization, finding satisfaction in meaningful work for the first time since his 20s. Marcus had started his own small practice focused on helping families resolve financial disputes before they reach the courtroom. "This award doesn't belong to me alone," I said into the microphone. "It belongs to a family that learned the hardest way possible that trust is earned through character, not inherited through blood." The Peterson Family Financial Literacy Foundation had exceeded every expectation. In our first year, we had conducted workshops for over 300 young adults, helped 12 families resolve inheritance disputes without litigation, and established scholarship programs at 3 community colleges. More importantly, the work had given my family a shared sense of purpose that replaced the material obsessions that had once driven us apart. The most valuable thing I learned through this experience, I continued, wasn't about money management or legal procedures. It was about the power of standing up for yourself when others underestimate your capabilities. After the ceremony, we gathered at my parents' modest apartment for a celebration dinner. The contrast with the formal family dinners of my childhood was remarkable. Instead of discussing stock portfolios and real estate investments, we talked about the families we had helped and the workshops we had planned. "I have an announcement," Marcus said as we finished eating. "Jennifer and I have decided to adopt a child from the foster care system." The decision reflected how profoundly his priorities had changed. The brother who had once stolen from me to fund his children's private education was now opening his home to a child who needed a family. "We want to give back in a way that actually matters," he explained. "And we want our biological children to understand that family isn't about shared genetics or financial status." Sandra reached across the table to squeeze Marcus's hand. "Your grandfather, Eugene, would be so proud of the man you've become. All of you would make him proud." Dorothy Williams added from the corner where she sat with a cup of tea. At 85, she had become an honorary advisor to our foundation and a bridge to understanding my grandfather's original intentions. "Eugene always believed that adversity revealed character rather than building it," she continued. This family's response to crisis proved that the character was always there, just buried under years of misplaced priorities. As the evening wound down, my father asked if he could speak with me privately. We stepped onto the small balcony overlooking the apartment complex parking lot, a far cry from the manicured lawns of their former neighborhood. "I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again," Robert began. "I'm sorry for the years I wasted being jealous of your independence and work ethic. You were always the son your grandfather hoped you would become. Dad, the past is behind us. What matters is what we do going forward." That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I've been thinking about retirement, and I realize I don't want to spend my final years just trying to make up for past mistakes. I want to build something positive. What did you have in mind? I want to expand the foundation's reach. Use my business connections to create internship programs that pair young adults with established professionals who can mentor them through early career decisions. The idea was brilliant. Instead of simply teaching financial literacy in workshops, we could create ongoing relationships that provided practical guidance and emotional support. It would give me a chance to use my professional network for something meaningful instead of just advancing my own interests, he continued. 6 months later, the Peterson Family Mentorship Program was serving 50 young adults throughout the county. The program paired participants with business leaders who provided career guidance, financial education, and emotional support during the critical transition from education to independence. My own life had stabilized in ways I never could have imagined during those dark months of investigation and confrontation. The landscaping business employed 18 people and had expanded into landscape design and environmental consultation. The trust fund, now fully restored and properly managed, provided security without creating dependency. Most importantly, I had finally gained what I had been seeking all along: genuine respect from my family members earned through standing up for my principles rather than inherited through genetic accident. But the greatest gift was something I hadn't expected: the knowledge that redemption was possible, even in the most damaged relationships, if all parties were willing to do the difficult work of honest change. My grandfather Eugene had designed his trust to teach lessons about responsibility, accountability, and the relationship between character and wealth. None of us could have anticipated how painful those lessons would be, but we had all emerged stronger and more authentic than before. As I sat in my modest apartment one evening reviewing applications for our scholarship program, I realized that the boy who had been dismissed as financially irresponsible had become a man capable of managing not just money, but justice, mercy, and family healing. The trust fund that had once been a source of conflict had become the foundation for a legacy of helping others navigate the complex relationships between money and family independence and responsibility, justice, and forgiveness. Sometimes the most important inheritance isn't money at all, but the wisdom to know when to fight for what's right and when to offer grace to those who have lost their way. Looking back, I understand that walking into that courtroom with my 3 folders wasn't just about reclaiming my inheritance. It was about reclaiming my right to be respected as an adult, capable of making my own decisions and facing the consequences of my own choices. The judge was stunned that day, not just by the evidence I presented, but by the young man who had the courage to demand accountability from people who were supposed to love and protect him. The greatest victory wasn't getting my money back. It was proving to myself and my family that standing up for what's right, even when it's painful, creates the foundation for authentic relationships and genuine respect that no amount of money could ever purchase. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace in your family and standing up for what you knew was right? How did you find the courage to do what needed to be done, even when it meant facing people you love in a difficult confrontation? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and reminded you of the importance of standing up for yourself when others try to control your life, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about real people who found the strength to fight for their dignity and independence when the people closest to them tried to hold them back. Thank you for listening to this deeply personal story about family betrayal, redemption, and the power of choosing justice balanced with mercy. Remember that sometimes the hardest battles we fight are with the people we love most, but those battles can also lead to the strongest and most authentic relationships we'll ever have. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right, keep believing in your own worth, and never let anyone convince you that asking for honesty and respect makes you the problem in the family.